Welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Mitch Stringer. And also, as the norm, the podcast brought to you by your friends at the Maryland Photography Alliance, which is a great place to go online and check out everything they have going on in terms of photo walks and contests and speakers and just really good information that helps you enjoy what you do and what you love to do even that much more. You can take a look at mdphotoalliance.org to see what they have going on. Chances are, if you take a look and then you come back a week later, there's going to be new helpful information that makes doing so worthwhile. Well, this episode, I am so pleased to have a guest who lives in really my favorite city in the world, and that's New York City. And with that, I want to welcome Lauren Wells. Welcome.
Thank you, Mitch. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Lauren is an expert in a field that I do not claim to be expert in, but a field that I love, and that is street photography. And so, maybe a good way to start is the beginning. How did this start for you? That, and when I say start, I mean picking up a camera for even the very first time. How did that become something you became aware of in your life?
It happened in a pretty unexpected way. I was lawyering at a bank and I got laid off. Um, and I got a year's severance package. So I thought, well, I don't want to be a lawyer. Never really wanted to be a lawyer. So I don't know what I want to do next. So how about I go traveling and I'm sure I'll figure it out then. And I want to record my trips, so I should learn how to take some photos. So I took a crash. It was a five session intro to photography, learning aperture, shutter speed, ISO. I borrowed my dad's film camera and I set off abroad to a few different countries. And I think it's easy when we're traveling to just be so interested in everything we see because it's all new. But everything was interesting to me because I was so focused on how could I get a good picture that I started looking, or should I say seeing, without realizing that that's what I was doing. And I think there's a difference. So I was just, looking up, looking down, left, right, and it was a way to stay engaged and somehow connected to the people and places that I was visiting. And when I came home, I just I got the bug, and I started. About 9 months later, I got sucked back into lawyering, and I just couldn't get out of it. It was paying my bills. I was on that hamster wheel, and I couldn't get out of bed. It was really hard to go to work. So I just started taking a camera and walking to work. I didn't know anything about street photography. I was doing it, but I didn't know that that's what I was doing. So that's how it started.
So from the time that you started doing that, what was the time frame before you realized the thing you're doing, that's actually a thing? Like, people do that, to where you may have then become aware of others professionally or just as a hobby. Like, what was that gap before you realized you were not an anomaly here in doing that thing you're doing?
I think, I mean, I may have the dates wrong, but if my memory serves me, I saw an interview with Cartier-Bresson. Um, I don't know if he had passed it or not, but I said, "Oh my God, he's doing that's what he's doing," and I just fell in love with his way of doing it.
Okay.
And it really appealed because he has such a sense of composition.
Mm-hmm.
So it really appealed to my logical brain, which is the lawyer. And then that je ne sais quoi, when you capture something that is meaningful um, or connects you to a photo, which to me has to go deeper than just the composition. And he, in my mind, was doing both. And I said, wow. And I was so inspired. And I think a lot of people get inspired when they're first introduced to photography into
Oh
him
yeah.
through his work. So that's when I realized that this was a thing. Um, and then I knew some photographers and journalists. I started to meet people in the field that they would kind of do this as a fun thing, even though they were making money doing photography in other ways. They would just always go out shooting because
Mhm.
they had the bug 24/7. So yeah, that's how I realized that this was a thing, and then took a little bit more ownership of it and started to become a little more conscious of what I was doing.
So are you a person who says, I'm going to go out today, this morning, this evening, whenever, and I'm going to shoot. I have that purpose now. Or is the camera with you all the time?
So it's not a yes no question. It used to be I would go out purposely and set time aside. And that's when I had a big camera. I was using a DSLR when I first started, um, which I kind of compared to skiing on the East Coast. Um, it's all ice on the East Coast when I learned to ski, and it sucked. It was cold. And I just wanted to go out west and go where all my friends talked about the powder. And somebody said to me, if you can learn to ski on ice, you can learn to ski on anything. And
Makes
so
sense.
if I was able to do street photography with a DSLR and a zoom lens, then I could do it. I could do with anything. Um, so that's why I would plan and go out purposely and spend usually in the afternoons. I'm not much of a morning person, even though the
Okay.
light is beautiful. And then as I got more and more into it, and I got a smaller camera, I would just take it with me wherever I went. And I started photographing a lot on the subways because that was my mode of transportation. Um, and the subways are the best. To me, it's the best place to do street photography, or it was for me, because people in New York City, they don't have a sense of privacy, because there's not a lot of space.
Mhm.
And everybody's in a rush. So everyone is doing their routines, whether it's putting on their makeup, brushing their hair. They're just doing things in public. They're used to just tuning out the world.
Mhm.
Um, so I would just see all these spectacular, in my mind, moments. Um, and then I started. So now I take my camera with me, um, but I will say I had a dry spell for wow, it's probably over 4 years now since COVID. I just lost I lost that passion
Wow.
and to shoot all the time. And I know that this happens to a lot of people, so I didn't really get too worried about it. But it can be scary because here's something you're so passionate about, and like, oh my God, where's that feeling? What's going on? And mine lasted longer than most. And I just started getting that excitement just a couple of months ago
Wow.
again. Yeah. So, but there's other reasons which we'll probably get into later on, which I can talk about as to why
You
that
know,
happened.
my oldest son just recently moved from Northern Virginia up to New York City, and so he takes the subway from around 125th Street down to Fifth Avenue, kind of right in the middle of all the shopping and so forth. And he says it's about a 25-minute trip and two trains. And he says, "Dad, I've seen some things." He's only been there for he's only been there for 2 months. 2 months for context. He said, "I've seen some things." And so, today's version of the subway is certainly not the 1970s and 80s version, or maybe you would know better than I, or even the 90s version. The things that will go on there were not one offs. I mean, it was kind of surreal at some points. I mean, when you think about, some of the, I guess it was what Gary Winogrand and some of the photography that was done. For those who haven't experienced it or didn't, how could you even describe what kind of photo wonderland the subway was during that era?
Um, I I don't know if nostalgia plays, I'm sure nostalgia plays a big role in the sense that back then, whatever was going on was normal. And I'm wondering if people actually saw it so differently. Back then, for example, everybody was reading a newspaper. Um, and that could be, if I'm a photographer, oh, damn, I don't want to get another person reading a newspaper.
Right.
Just like with the phones now. I mean, it drives me crazy with the phones. And I know a lot of photographers feel that way. But there was also there was all the graffiti, and there was a lot more crime. Although, unfortunately, that crime is, I've seen a lot of it in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's so there's more of an edge than there was before the last 2 years, uh, for me on the subway. Um, but I wasn't around then shooting.
Mm-hmm.
I was around, so I don't know if I would experience it any differently if that were, I had nothing to compare it to. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of photographers that were around compare things like, oh, back then, which we all tend to do. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
your parents with the music. Oh my God, that music.
Yeah.
And then we do the same thing when the next generation comes along.
You mentioned early on traveling to some countries and getting really engrossed in what there was to see and so forth. And what I have found is that there can be very different perspectives on street photography, culture to culture, country to country, town to town. And I've been, for example, in Old Delhi in India, and
Mm-hmm.
people are very welcoming, or Bangladesh, people are very welcoming. But there's plenty of other countries where it is not really greeted wholeheartedly, and people are not super happy to be photographed. What have you seen though, whether it's countries or just cities, about how those cultures impact the photo opportunities for street photography?
Uh, yeah, they definitely impact them in different ways. So I used to live in Spain, for example, and the last time I was back there, I I was actually showing my portfolio to something called Photo España. It's um, their big photo event and exhibit, and they review portfolios and have a lot of photo exhibitions all over. Um, and one of the reviewers, I did a I had my portfolio was uh, about childhood because I tend to photograph children, so I made this into um, a photo essay. And basically, all candid photos of children in New York City, often unaware, and
Mm-hmm.
their parents unaware that I was photographing them. Not always, but often. And he said to me, I love this, but I can't publish it because you don't have releases.
Mm-hmm.
And in Spain, you need permission. You need written permission, if I'm not mistaken, from a parent. And I said, but I photographed this in the States. We don't have that. And that's not the same issue. And he thought about it and he said, okay. Um, but I remember when I was in Spain, I didn't get written permission. I was just photographing with no, just because I was there and wanted to. I would get either verbal or tacit consent from the parents,
Hmm.
just because everybody expect, that's rude, how dare you invade my privacy like that, and it's not allowed. So it is definitely harder to do, but um kind of like that skiing analogy, if you figure it out, then it's easier when you go to a place like India.
Hmm.
And interesting you mentioned India, because I was just in India for the first time in February. My
Oh.
cousin got married, and I didn't have a lot of time to go around photographing because there was a lot centered around the wedding. But when I did go out, I went out a couple of times, with purpose for a few hours at a time. And yeah, everybody was so, it was so easy, so to speak. Everybody, nobody cared if you were
Hmm.
photographing. Um, but what I found was I really needed, I would have needed, I would say, a week or two to consistently have gone out photographing in order to penetrate the veneer.
Hmm.
Um, I was just shooting as a foreigner, looking at India as a foreigner. And so everything was new and exotic to me.
Sure.
And that doesn't always, at least for me, it doesn't make such an interesting photo. It's interesting to me because it's all new. But
Hmm.
would someone from, would an Indian street photographer think this is interesting? And so, like, back to that, Cartier-Bresson, he had the composition and then he had that something. I wasn't able to get that something because I didn't know the culture. I just wasn't familiar
Hmm.
enough.
Sure.
And that just would have taken a little bit of time, just being out there every day.
I tell you one place that I've been to enough times and long enough each time that I feel like I've been able to sort of get past that outermost layer, like you talked about, when you're very much a tourist, so to speak, is
Mm-hmm.
Cuba. So traveling to
Mm.
Cuba and speaking some Spanish and understanding more Spanish than I can speak, really to sort of get into the culture and meet the people and have grandma take you into her home and she's got a pot on the stove and she's introducing you to the grandkids, and there's hugs, and you don't know these people and you're being asked to sit down, and you're, in my case, talking about baseball, and then you have a camera and they someone will say essentially like, will you take a picture, and then everybody's being brought over to be photographed with no expectation of getting a print. They just want that interaction. And so I believe that you've been to Cuba. Do you feel that it's sort of different than your India experience, or more similar than different?
You're spot on. It's very different. I speak Spanish, and uh, to me, I think Cuba is one of my favorite places in the world because I was able to penetrate immediately just by speaking the language.
Hmm.
And their culture is so open.
Hmm.
They're so inviting. The people, and so instead of just the cars and the old buildings, it's easy to connect to the people if you want to. Even
Hmm.
I bet if you didn't speak the language, that it would probably, they're so open. But yes, it was, that's a wonderland to me. I mean, I don't even, I could, well, I would say, I was going to say I could go there without a camera and just have all these amazing moments, but then I'd be, oh my God, I want to capture this. That's the
Yes.
problem we have as photographers. Um, yes, they are some of the kindest, most joyful people I've ever met. Um, and I also think that's because they have been through just about everything as a collective, that
Mhm.
nothing phases them. So they really are able to enjoy life. They have to find ways to enjoy life, even though they might not have bread on the shelves that week. They're just, they go a little deeper to, they know it matters. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I guess question I would have for you as we're talking about this, when you go to a place, it could be New York City, it could be any of the places we mentioned, or for people listening, it could be their hometown. When you're in an environment where there's so many potential photos to be made, it's almost like overload. So when you have that, you know, I don't know if it's as formal as a process, but I'll use that word. What is your process to say, I'm standing here on this street corner and wow, there is a lot going on with light and people and cars and buildings? And how do you sort of take all this in and then identify those moments within that larger mural of life and say, there's the image I want? That's the image I want. How do you kind of simplify that and make sense of it when there's so much available?
Okay, first of all, thank you for that tip because I teach workshops in Coney Island, for Leica, and I've had a couple of students in the past say that they've been so overwhelmed that they didn't know what to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And I never see that. I am able to tune out. I'm just, I will stand around and I'm looking at the light, I'm looking at the backgrounds, and then I'm just watching people. And once it's like watching the frames of a film strip. Once I find something interesting, I just lock in. So I'm able to tune out everything else, and then I'll just follow that person or scene around for a little bit, to either get something or not. Um, but just through my students' eyes, I would have to take them and hold their hand, and we would work it out. Uh, but I always think more is better. It's like shooting fish in a barrel, as they say, that you can't miss. It's easy shooting, and you are reminding me that not everybody um, sees it that way.
Yeah, I know, like, for example, it's a different context, but I think it's a parallel. So I've been fortunate to photograph wildlife in Africa a fair amount. And when you go to the migration and you have the zebra and the wildebeest and they're crossing the river, the Mara River, to get to the other side, and you have crocodiles the size of buses, literally, in the river, you have this massive scene and you have animals that are just, this is just the reality. You have animals that are drowning, you have animals that are getting out of the water on the good side of the river, you have animals getting in, and because of the banks, which are rocky and with dirt, you have dirt flying and rocks going and animals stressed. And then you have crocodiles in the river that have either grabbed something to eat or they're on the way to doing that. Then you have animals that are in the midst of escaping a crocodile. You have all of this, and it's all simultaneous. And to be able to scan that massive, just scene and say, image, 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 image. And it's like, when I think of, street photography, there's a logic out there, like find the light and your composition of the backgrounds and see what comes into that, or find an interesting person and then follow them till they're in that light. And there's more than one philosophy, certainly, but there's so much going on that, slowing your brain down to kind of process it, it's not second nature for everybody.
That's a good point. And I learned that. So now I can now see the connection where I did a project on the game of stickball. I
Love it.
photographed that community for, I don't know, I think it was 6 years. And when I got all the batters and I got the people on the sidelines, but then I needed people in the outfield and the batter running to one of the bases. And I was following the action. So I'd wherever the ball was, and my camera was just going all over the place. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a photographer and an editor and very wise. And he just said, Lauren, you got to, and he shot sports professionally. And he said, you need to pick a spot, stay at a place on first base, and just keep your camera in one position. That's it. And
Mm-hmm.
you just stay there. And I think it's similar to, you're talking about your, um, all these, all this stuff going on in the river with the crocodiles and everything else. And it's almost like, oh, you're missing something. If, oh, wait, this crocodile's opening his mouth, but over there, look over there, and you feel like you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
And when I was told, no, you got to just trust and stay in one spot, there's plenty of action to get. Nobody's leaving. You can focus on, but just stay focused. Or if you keep running around, you'll never get anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good. So I had to learn that through, I guess, shooting sports, and trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're not missing anything. You are in the right place. There's one of my favorite, I don't know if it's a story, it's a parable, or I think it's some Sufi poet or somebody. I don't remember the name, but there's a story of this a guy who's what do you call it when someone is does archery?
An archer.
An archer, okay. And this guy got the bullseye every single time. And people used to come up to them, how do you do that? That's like next to impossible. He said, oh, that's easy. I shoot the arrow first and then I draw the bullseye. So he's basically saying wherever I am is the center. That's what matters. And he just owns it. And so if you just stay put and trust, some magic will happen if you claim your territory, so to speak.
As you shared, you had a career as an attorney and then transitioned to what you do now. And when people ask me about photography and what I get from it, I often say that at the point in my life when I started really seriously to be involved in photography, that I started living a photographic life, which to me means I see images even when I don't have my camera. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I feel like I'm more aware and appreciative of the world and what's around me. And I started living, I put that in quotes, more when I started living this photographic life, as I say, when I'm just aware of everything. Is that at least that concept something that you can connect to?
Absolutely. When I first went traveling, it was a way for me to be present. And I was alone, so traveling for 6 months. So it's easy to be with the thoughts in your head. Oh, did I get to the right place? Did I miss something? I don't know. We all have these crazy thoughts that run through our head. And
Mhm.
this just kept me focused, present, and it felt very peaceful to do that. And I am really into, I don't know, a lot of, I guess, personal development and growth, so to speak. So there's a lot of meditation and all different ways of getting to know thyself. And I think photography is one of those ways that is not I don't know if the word part of the woo woo techniques or anything, but it's a form of meditation.
Mhm.
Um, just paying attention. I mean, meditation means to know thyself.
Mhm.
And so if you're really, you got to be aware of you and what you're putting out into the world when you're photographing. At least I have to. I know that when I am not in a good mood, chances are somebody's going to yell at me for taking their photo. And when I am really centered, I've talked about this before in other talks I've had. It was over, I don't know, 15 years ago, or 10 plus. I was in Union Square photographing and I came across these two boys, their dad and their dog. And I don't know what it was that day, but I was so centered and like in this zen state, and I was very aware of how calm and peaceful and just happy for no reason I was. And I had my DSLR and my zoom lens. I was not a fly on the wall. And I'm photographing kids who are, they look to be like 8 and maybe 11 or something. And I just got real close and was there for at least an hour. And nobody, the father especially, did not ask me what I was doing. They almost didn't see me. And I
Hmm.
was just, this is incredible. And it was all because of how I was inside.
So
So,
that's interesting. You know, when I think of when I think of street photography, I look at all sorts of ways to do street photography. I think a lot of times people say street photography, what is that? And they may have a picture in their head of what that looks like, but whether you are, Joel Meyerowitz, or maybe on the other side of the spectrum, you're Bruce Gilden, and there's all sorts of people and techniques and looks of photography in between. It really is so many different things, isn't it? Street
yep.
photography.
Yep. And there are purists who believe it must be this way or that way and must be candid and there must be people in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think Stephen Shore is a street photographer and he doesn't have people in his photos often. So um, I think when we first, well, I'll speak for myself. When I first start learning anything, I always kind of need to know what the rules are in order to get kind of a structure and a foundation established. Um, but then it's sort of like Picasso. He was a classically trained painter, and he painted perfectly, the perfect light. People looked perfect in their proportions, and then all of a sudden, bam, he becomes this cubist and this abstract painter, and he kind of just broke out from that. Um, but I think it's okay. There are people that want to know the rules and need rules for just to have some parameters and not get overwhelmed. And then there are others who say, I'm just, this is what I'm doing. I don't care what you call it. And to me, if you're out in public, that's street photography. Just doesn't matter if you're on the street, on the beach, in a public place, indoors. Well, I mean, it's the same type of uh, photography, whether the sun's out or it's hidden behind a roof. I don't see the difference. So,
If it's out, yeah, no, and that makes perfect sense to me. I know, for example, when I'm in your city doing street photography, I have kind of like a ritual. I get up early, depending on where I'm staying. I have bagel, lox, cream cheese. It's mandatory.
you got to.
And then I know that I'm going to hit Union Station for people coming in off of the trains, and see what that light looks like coming through the windows up high, see what kind of light and shadow and etc. And then once I've sort of either exhausted that or I'm exhausted of that for a little while, then I'm going to probably move down to, could be to Chinatown, or go by where people are selling fish and vegetables and all that, and all the while, I'm shooting something, but then when I'm done shooting that, I'm scanning the street for other moments or things that look like they could become moments or light. And so it's like I have I guess I would call it a routine or a process, whatever you want to call it, because I'm always,
You mean Grand Central?
or
Do you mean Grand
Thank you,
Central?
Grand Central.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
I'm always trying to find I guess I would call it almost like authenticity, because so many cities, and New York is certainly one of these, whether it's gentrification or urban renewal, whatever the term du jour is, finding the authentic parts of cities gets harder and harder to do. So when you decide that you're going to go out with the intent to, spend X amount of time, doing your street photography, just as I described my process, do you have like a similar thing that you do before you hit the streets, or does it vary just depending on the day?
It varies depending on the day. Um, Mine tends to be in the afternoon, as I
Hmm.
told you.
Yeah.
um, and now versus then, when I was really hungry and almost needed to get a photo to just affirm that I can do this.
Hmm.
Now I just go and it doesn't matter. So I'm not looking as much. Um, but if I see, oh, I got my camera ready. And I think it's easier to find those authentic moments when I'm not looking, because just seeing, as you said, um, the gentrification, and to me, the gentrification is more composition wise because everything is kind of the same,
Hmm.
but people are still people.
Hmm.
So if I can get past that and find a moment, then we're good. But sometimes it's just hard to see past that. Like I'll just shut down and say, oh, that's just that's boring.
Hmm.
Um, so if I'm not looking and I just happen to be living my life and I'm out, even though my purpose is to be out, but I'm walking, I'm enjoying uh, the weather or conversation with people. I love to talk to people on the street. I tend to, whenever someone's like looking at their phone and looking up, I'll always say, do you need help? Do you need finding, directions? And most of the time, no, they're looking for an Uber. But yeah, I'm always trying to engage because I don't. That's what makes New York special. So, and I think it is harder, but for me, I think it's harder because I'm not. I used to hunt, and I had this propulsion to hunt. It was like an energy that I needed it, and it fueled me. And now that tired me out, and I'm no longer, which is why I think I took those years off, which I wasn't really motivated.
Hmm.
So now I'm not hunting as much, and I had to kind of learn a different way to do this. And so now I'm just out being, and great. I got my camera. There's always a moment around.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess the difference now is if I don't come home with a photo for a month, okay, that's cool. I'll get one.
Yeah. Well, and hearing you say that, it's funny because a lot of times, like I'll shoot an NFL football game, or I'll shoot a Major League Baseball game, and I'm in the media room either after the game or it's halftime, and I think to myself, I don't have a single picture. I do not have. I've shot the entire game, and I'll say to one of my colleagues, nothing out there so far, huh? Yeah, no. And the funny thing is, if I showed the average person the photos that are being used from that first half, they'd say, "Oh, wow, that's cool." And then, but for us, we are our own worst critics, because when we say I didn't get anything, we're looking for, like, crazy over the top, like that's the one. Whereas there's a whole lot of really good in there if we
Right,
would admit it to
right,
ourselves.
right, right. But I think that's a good standard to have
Yeah.
because, first of all, there's so much street photography, there's so many visuals out there that if it satisfies us and we have those standards as photographers, then it's probably good. And those, or great, for what I mean. And those
Yeah.
great photos don't come along often, and they shouldn't, or else they'd be just kind of average.
Right.
So yeah, but I know that feeling. And then sometimes when you put those away for a while, you look back and you're like, okay, that okay, decent one, that might be a little better than I thought. You need some distance from it.
Well, I think, for me, I guess it's about a year and a half ago, I had published a book on my Cuba photography, and I had an editor who was wonderful. And I think having a separate set of eyes who
Mm.
wasn't there with me, there's that classic thing. Some of our favorite photos are because we know the context under which we made them. She did not know the context, didn't necessarily care, not to be unfeeling, but she was looking at it on the merits of the photo. And it was helpful. It was really helpful in doing the cut downs from what we started with and what we ended up, with, because we are our own worst critics. One thing I wanted to get your opinion on is a lot of times people feel uncomfortable photographing family. They say, "Oh, I don't take really good pictures." And but then to take it a step further, sometimes people say, "I don't feel comfortable photographing strangers," which they would like to, but there's just this hurdle in their mind. So, how would you, and I feel like you've definitely done this in your work and workshops, how do you move people over that hurdle of, do you ask permission? Do you not ask permission? How do you go about asking permission if that is appropriate or that's the decision you've made? How do you kind of handle that whole topic of ask, don't ask?
Well, first off, I think it's a muscle. There are some people that just have no fear. I'm not one of them. I'm somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Um, and if I haven't gone out for a long time, I'll go to a place where people expect to be photographed. Uh, Times Square. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everyone, you may say, oh, Times Square, I am not interested. That's just so Disneyland. Well, I suggest you go out and try it because first of all, everything's going on there. And it's easy to just practice, get your feet wet. Um, because people think you're a tourist as much as there are tourists. All the tourists there think you're a tourist. So um, that's number one, getting comfortable. And then number two, sometimes I say to just, or I'll do this if I don't have the perfect, I don't have the perfect shot, and I know it's not going to be the right one, but I'm still a little hesitant whether I should take these people's photos. I just take it just to get that, to break that fear down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there are ways to get tacit consent, um, which I tend to smile a lot. So if there's a scene going on, let's say with I don't know, a parent and their kids, or a couple, um, I'll just smile and I'll just watch them, and they know that I'm watching, and then I'll just kind of point to the camera, and if they don't say anything, that's tacit consent. And if
Mm-hmm.
they say yes, that's clear consent. And sometimes they'll just shake their head.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'll smile and move on. Other times, I was out last week, or a couple of weeks ago, for the first time in a while, and there was a woman on a scooter with, I presume, her boyfriend, and they were at a red light, and I just put the camera up and pretty much in her face and just took the picture, and I had this big smile, and she just looked at me and she said, oh my god, that girl just took my picture, but she didn't know how to react because I was it was coming from a good place. I always think if you say, there's that line, you're not taking, you're making. If you can really think about, you're not stealing from somebody. If you have that attitude, you're going to get resistance
Yeah.
from people. But if there's something so beautiful, they have a beautiful smile, or they just add to this beautiful composition, then that changes your energy. And that makes all the difference when you're interacting with people. Um, And then it's sort of like being a salesperson. You're going to get rejected. It's part of it. And
Mhm.
if you can get comfortable with that, then um, you're golden.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think, as you said, if you're coming from a place of genuinely wanting to make a photo of a person who's wearing a great outfit, or they, have a great smile, or something cute's going on, you're not sticking a lens through bushes to try to get a picture of somebody in their backyard. You're leading from
Right,
a healthy place, and that, I think,
right,
does come across. You're not the creepy person.
right.
Kind of
And
tied in. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, and one more thing, if you want to ask permission and you want to do street portraiture, or that's fine. That's fine. And
Mhm.
I'm sure can make, I mean, people do, you make beautiful photos. It's just a different type of photo.
Yeah, I know. I just interviewed Robbie Quinn, who is doing a whole thing with photographing specifically film photographers in and around New York City. So not digital, but if they're shooting with film, he's making portraits of them. And I just thought, wow, what a cool
That's
idea.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Oh, I
thought that
hope I
was
run into him.
yeah, I thought that was really neat. So my question for you is, they say, like, in an athlete, if it doesn't matter how good your technique is, if your body won't let you throw a pitch 100 miles an hour, you're just not going to. So you can learn to have better pitching mechanics and this and that, but if your body is not such, you're not going to throw a ball 100 miles an hour. So my question, the parallel is, can you teach someone to see better than they do before they started talking with you?
I
Or
think
is it
so.
innate? Is it an innate skill?
I no, I think it's a developed skill. 100%. It doesn't mean there aren't people that have it innately. Um, but first of all, composition itself is, to me, that's a skill. There are rules. The way our eye sees what is pleasing to the eye, pleasing to the brain. Um, there seems to be an established set of parameters for that. Again, break them all you want, but I've found that I've taught librarians who I was asked to teach something at the New York Public Library, where librarians were going to be, or people that worked in the library were going to be teaching their patrons how to do street photography. So I'm like,
Oh,
wait a
wow.
second. These people don't know how to do street photography, and I have to teach them how to teach somebody else. So I just taught them some basic compositional techniques, and they felt so empowered. And all of a sudden, the world becomes interesting. You look at things in different ways. Oh, well, if I take a picture of that man and there's a leading line that's going straight to him, then it makes it more dynamic. And they just felt so empowered. So that, to me, that's a foundation of seeing.
Mhm.
Then the whole, well, is it interesting and why? And that takes a little more. But I think that's more about really becoming self-aware and noticing what you like in a photo. When you look at work, why are you attracted to that? Try to figure that out.
Mhm.
To me it's a to me it's a there's something familiar when we look, when somebody, if I look at a photo and I see a gesture that I know what that means without knowing the story behind it, it's a universal story.
Mhm.
And so those are things that I end up gravitating towards without, I don't think I was conscious of it at first. Um, and if people can pay attention to that, what makes me tick? Why am I interested in something? Then they can start paying attention to that when they shoot. So I think it's something that can be developed. What about
Yeah.
you?
Well, I think that you've got to start with things that are somewhat concrete, like you said. There's, it's rule of thirds. It's, it's understanding the exposure triangle. Things that are just factual that people can grab onto. It's something as basic as understanding how your camera works. So I think once you have some of those, very teachable, you can read it, you can practice it, you can make sure it works. Then once you have those down, then the things that are not so black and white, they're more subtle, which is the seeing part. I think that's when you can sort of graduate, if you will, to that other level of it. And to that end, sometimes people will say to me, I'm going on vacation and, I'm going to this location. What do you think I should shoot? I'm going to go to all these places. And what I'll say to them is give yourself an assignment.
Mhm.
So you're not just taking snapshots. Give yourself an assignment as though you're presenting it to people at the end of your trip. And by doing that, by having this artificial but self assignment, it gives people some focus. It really says, okay, well, I'm here. What do I see? What are people eating? What does it smell like? Well, where's that smell coming from? What is the sidewalk? Is it cobblestone? Is it a dirt path? Where did I go to? What was that little shop like? And it gives people some focus, which if you understand the basics of photography, now you're looking for smaller moments, macro, you're looking for wide angle. And it helps a person who's newer in doing this kind of go down the path of understanding it more. And I think that ties in with seeing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And we're back to what we discussed earlier, which is when there's so much going on,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get grounded? I, before, right when I was asked to start teaching for Leica Academy, um, we, I was asked to attend one of the workshops so I could see how they operate. And I
Sure.
was super busy that week. So I was showing up, but after the lectures, everybody went out shooting all night and I was going doing what I need. I had a lot of work to do and other things to take care of. And um my now boss said to me, it was the last night. So everyone had been photographing for 4 full days. And he said, I want you to go out and shoot a story now. And I said, you're kidding, right? And he said, no, I want you to give yourself an assignment and really push yourself. And I was like, God damn it. I had, how am I going to do this in just a few hours? And I just started walking. And I just went into the subway. I think I don't know if I was on my way home or I just went into the subway purposefully. And I'm just wandering around shooting. And I said, okay, what can I do here? And I just took a breath. I said, what does the subway feel like to me? And it's congestion. There's lots of people. Everyone's running around, stressed out. So I started to photograph that. How do I capture that? So I had my camera on slow shutter speed to get blurred motion to show, or I had the doors closing on people. They looked like sardines, but I was able to focus um, on one aspect, and that enabled me to tell a story. And I completely agree with you on that.
In that context, when you were tasked with creating this story and you chose to go to the subway, is that because for you the subway has just sort of been a tried and true area of opportunity where pictures often are to be captured?
Um, Perhaps I don't know how conscious I was. Everyone was doing that came into this workshop had a story already. They came with a story in mind,
Okay.
or they figured it out before they started, and it was they had a shot list. I mean, they
Oh wow.
knew where to go, and I think because there's just so much going on in the subway that, okay, I'm going to get some pictures and maybe I'll
Mm-hmm.
figure it out once I start shooting. Whereas if I'm on the street, I'm just going to get lost in terms of, it's one place where there's a
Mhm.
lot of people, so it would be easier to figure something out.
I'm thinking of, like, for example, I interviewed Phil Penman, and Phil was talking about, if he feels like things just aren't like flowing yet, on a given morning, he'll find a steam grate, a subway grate with the steam coming up. He'll find it and he'll wait for something interesting. And he said, inevitably, when he does that, then he just starts finding stuff, and it's like he's off to
Yeah.
the races. But he just needs like something good to happen to get it going.
Yep, to ground him. And that's such a Phil photo. Phil's awesome.
Yeah.
Phil's awesome. Yeah, I help him out sometimes with his workshops, and he's awesome
Yeah.
as a photographer and a teacher
Yeah.
and just
Yeah. Some of the things he does with reflections are just really remarkable. And, for me, I was with him. I did a workshop with him, and it was just Phil and three of us. And it was
oh wow,
fantastic
that's
because,
phenomenal.
yeah, it was just great. And he and I keep up now, and it's just a wonderful guy. This is interesting. I was listening to an audio book, which I've become slightly addicted to, but this one was about Deanne Arbus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in New York about 2 weeks ago, and I didn't know this, but there was a Deanne Arbus exhibition at the
Yeah.
Armory. And I took my eldest son, the one I mentioned who moved to the city, who had no idea about Deanne Arbus whatsoever. And the exhibition was packed. It was packed, and a beautifully done exhibition, and just really interesting the way they were showing over 400 of her images. And it just got me thinking about how photography has gone from a genre that at one point was really not considered art. Painting was art, charcoal drawings were art, photography was not art. And now it has really, I think, moved to be appreciated, from my perspective, the way it should be. But, how have you seen photography, the way it's not only looked at by others who are viewers of photography, and those who are involved in it? How have you seen it evolve since when you really started getting into photography seriously when you left your legal career? How's it been, the evolution?
Um, that's a good question. I think there's a little of everything. I think it depends where you put your focus. Because I think if you spoke to 10 people, you'd probably get 10 different answers.
Mhm.
So from my perspective, um, it's there's been such an explosion of images in the world that like our brains can't keep up. And before, I mean, there's some photography that I look at now, like street photography, that was known and just so fantastic. And now, if we were to do something like that, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head, although there are plenty of images, that would just be commonplace. And oh, I've seen this before, and it's harder to do to make something interesting because there's just so much more
Mhm.
out there.
Yeah.
Um, but that said, I think there's a lot more outlets for our work to be seen. Based on the digital world, um, there's so much more interest in photography in the mainstream, um, and now on the one hand it's harder to get a book published by an established publisher where they're going to pay you without you
Mhm.
having to put something out of pocket. But there are a lot more independent publishers, and you can self-publish, and there's so many avenues to have your work seen, and also more of a need for work. I mean, people are advertising. They need photographs for that, and they advertise on social media. There's just so many ways. I mean, I had my work was up for at LaGuardia. I think it was LaGuardia. Yeah, when they were building it, they were looking for some New York. scenes. And I had an agent at the time, and they had asked if, um, so they'd put me up for it. I didn't get, they didn't choose my photos, but there's just, and nobody would have been able to find me way back
Mhm.
when I
Yeah.
just wasn't this big name in lights. So I think if somebody is determined and can put blinders on again and not just get overwhelmed by all of this information, and kind of visual overload, then there's an avenue for your work to get where you want it to go as art or anything else.
Well, and it kind of ties in with a thought I have. A lot of times I'll meet people who are right out of college and they are maybe interning with a professional baseball team and, getting started in photography. And they'll say, I want to make a career of this and how can I do this? And, all these logical questions. And of course, newspapers are either many of them are out of business or they've shrunken their photo departments. And my advice to them is typically, have your style. Don't mimic a style. You can look at everybody and just see kind of the history and where things have been, but you're going to get recognized and go further if people are hiring you specifically for your vision and not just you can make a competent photo, because there's lots of people who can do that. Cameras almost on their own can do that now.
Yep.
You need to have your unique view. I'm sure you get asked some version of that kind of a question. What has been your advice to whomever who's asked that about, how can I evolve my photography or evolve into a career?
Well, I agree with what you just said. It takes time. First of all, I think it takes time to develop a style. So, what I'm appreciative of is that I didn't know any of this while I was going along, that I needed to develop a style. I was just kind of figuring it out and learning because I'm pretty much self taught. I didn't go to school for it. So I was just learning, okay, what do I need to learn next? Okay, well, how about lighting? I need to, um, I learned composition, how to get comfortable with people just by doing it. I was learning all different types of photography just to make money, real estate, events, portraiture.
Mhm.
And through all of that, I started to get a sense of what I liked, what I didn't, and showing my work to other people. And I'll focus on the street photography because that's where I developed my style, which then spilled over into my other work, was just by doing it and doing it and doing it. And I would show people my work and they would all notice things that I had never noticed. That I love that my photos tend to have kind of an energy to them. And um, there's, I think, more joy than maybe sadness, but there's some kind of emotional connection, at least for me. And then my composition, it's just how I see based on that lawyer brain of mine. There's so much information in the frame, but it's organized. At least
Mhm.
that's how I intended to be. Um, but that just kind of happened as I got better at the technique. And I was looking at other people's work, inspired by it. I don't think I was trying to copy it, although sometimes I think it's it's good practice to try to copy a photo that someone did just to figure out how they're doing it.
Mhm.
Um, and then have other people look at your work and start to notice things that you're like, oh, duh. Yeah, that is me. And that's where your style comes from. So that's number one. And then I say to people, and I just told someone this a week or two ago, who was asked, who just graduated college and wants to break into business, um, just take whatever is offered to you. If you're asked to shoot, the backyard barbecue, just go, and you don't need to go to a big outlet. Or just, when I was a lawyer, people wanted the big jobs at the big law firms, but the people who got the most experience worked at the small little places that was
Yeah.
like a two-man firm. So don't look for the glamour or anything. Just get your feet wet, when just anything that you can get, and do a lot on your own. Um, Even if it's for free, if you love doing it, just get some work, get that you can show people, create a website, um, and step by step, it's going to fall into place.
Mhm.
You really have to be patient. And sometimes the doors that you walk through may not be the where you get the brass ring, but it's going to lead you there. So every door is an opportunity. And I always tell people to trace back, if they're doing something they love now, to figure out, well, if they had never met this person, then they never would have gone to that party where they met this person, got
Mhm.
that job, and then
Yep.
that job led to. So it's all connected. If you, it all works out.
And it's interesting because unless you've experienced it, it's hard to know how connected things are.
Yep.
And you have to live it to look back and say this led to that, led to this, led to this. So I know this question, it's sort of a multi-part question, which I'm a little notorious for, but people are going to ask, because it's a logical question. When you are getting ready to go out on the street, what does your bag consist of? What kind of what lenses are you typically walking, or lenses are you walking around with? They're good. People will think, is she a prime person? Does she like the zooms? Does she? So I know that you shoot with Leica and maybe other brands as well. But what kind of lenses do you have when you head out on the street?
It's either a 35 or a 28. Period. I don't,
Okay.
no more Zooms, none of that. And just because I don't I don't need it.
Mhm.
And they're big. And I'm able to now fill the frame in a 28 or a 35, whereas before, I was using a Zoom back when I was starting, because I couldn't fill a frame, I couldn't get that close to people.
Mhm.
um and that's it. So I'll just bring, yeah, it's one or the other. um and then I wear a little money belt. I look like a tourist, not intentionally, but sometimes it works in my favor. And my phone, bottle of water, extra battery. I like my hands free.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
And are you shooting digital or film?
I'm shooting digital. Yeah,
Okay.
all digital. I had gone to well, I'll be candid. Like I had loaned me a film camera for a bit to start doing film again, because I started on film, and then I had to send it back. So it's okay. Well, I'll put that project away for now and come back to it another. But I had at one point wanted to work on film because I was in such a rut. I had no inspiration,
Mhm.
and someone recommended that to me. Well, maybe this will help you because it's, you're starting over again. And so that was the intention.
Was there a not to make it overly dramatic, was there a moment or a thing you did to get yourself out of that rut?
Nope. No, that's the thing. I stopped trying
Okay.
because I just said to myself, um, it's okay. I mean, I'm still shooting. I still was shooting gigs and getting paid and still teaching. And I loved to do that. So instead of pressing myself, I have a lot of interests. I have a lot of passions, and a lot of people I know that are good at something. That's their one thing, and I could imagine if they lost that. Oh, that's scary. But
Sure.
I was okay because I have a lot of other things that um, to focus on. So just going out and shooting in the street, which is not where I'm getting my bread and butter anyway. It's just something that I really enjoy. Um, I just trusted. I mean, it took a while because there were times I would fight it, but in the end, I said, no, it'll either come back or it won't. And sometimes I would bring a camera out anyway. Okay, let me see, maybe, and nothing.
Yeah.
And then just bam, I don't know, just clicked into place again.
Sometimes
So,
things happen for a reason when they happen.
yep,
It's
yep.
as simple as that. Well, I do know that people are going to want to follow your work. They're going to want to look at more of your work. Where's the best place for people to do that?
They can go on Instagram. My Instagram is Lauren Wells, one word, no space between my name. It's LAURENWELLES, or on my website at laurenwells.com. Um, and yeah, I don't post a lot at this point, but I every now and then I do. So you'll find my work
That's great.
if you check that out.
And then if you're doing workshops, will those be on your website or Instagram, or is that something that maybe one of the Leica stores would post that's upcoming?
That would be on the Leica website, on my website, and on Instagram. I also do, in addition to group workshops, and I'll be doing a couple for Leica. Uh, Definitely one at Coney Island, maybe a second at Coney Island next year. And also, I do bespoke workshops for Leica, so one-on-one workshops where you say, I want to learn this, I want to focus on this, and we'll tailor a plan. And we
That's
could do
great.
it in person at the Leica store or online if you're out of town.
That's fantastic. Well, Lauren, I want to thank you for your generosity of time and just sharing everything that you have and your really very special photography. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mitch. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. And I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to remind our listeners that we publish a new episode on the 1st and 15th of every month. So take a look at those. Be sure to like and subscribe, as they say. And subscribing is important because that way you don't miss an episode. As soon as it gets published, it gets downloaded and you can start listening right away. You can check out what I have going on as well at Mitch Stringer Images on Instagram and then mitchstringerimages.com on the internet. Until next time, I wish you great light. I wish you great shooting, and we'll talk again soon.